All right, so we are now recording, and we'll talk about this in a little bit in our meeting. But this is part of we've been trying to record them just to try to capture everything so that we can refer to it later. But it is now, I think, actually part of our open meetings policy, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. So. But Phil, I will throw it to you to start with the agenda, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So so today, I'm not sure if we have any announcements. Did we have any announcements for today, Marilyn or Steve or anyone?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. Just a reminder that the scope of work for the Great Seneca Plan, the next phase of the master plan update for this area, was approved by the planning board last Thursday. And when I get a moment here, I will try to drop a copy of that scope of work into the chat box for folks who might want to read it. We should have a recording of the planning board session available for those who want to go online and find it. But that, again, outlines at a very broad level, very high level, what we're planning to focus on in trying to update the Great Seneca Plan and some of our particular areas of focus.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Any other announcements from you? No.
I think that's it for now, and we'll get into some of the other.
Right. Okay, so walking through the rest of the agenda, we're going to see a presentation on the Development Activity Information Center webpage and documents from Aaron Savage. So that, again, is the portal where we will find information about ongoing development projects that we've talked about, getting some further insight and maybe providing a little bit of feedback, I imagine, as part of that conversation. And then after that, an open meetings presentation discussion. So one of the things, and that'll be by Maren, Tamika, and Steve. And so there are new, or refined procedures around the government meetings, planning board meetings, committee meetings such as ours that we'll be discussing, and probably a couple of minor refinements or changes to the way we do business. And then after that, we'll discuss the IAC operating rules and we'll adjourn. So with that said, does anybody have any questions about that agenda before we get started? All right. Well, then I guess, Aaron, are you on the line?
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick. Hi, everyone. For those, I don't know if I've met all of you virtually yet, but my name's Aaron Savage, and I work in the Mid-County Division with Steve and Maren and Jessica and Tamika. And I'm also going to be working on the plan update or amendment with them as well, specifically with the urban design guidelines for this as well. So let's see.
Thanks for joining us, Aaron.
Yeah, of course. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk about DAIC a little bit. This isn't a super long presentation, but hopefully this is helpful and just, helping everyone navigate this portal. I know it can be a little confusing. So yeah, I'll just start now. So DIC, basically it stands for Development Activity Information Center. And it's basically where we keep all of the application documents and plan files for every type of application at the planning department. It's worth noting that we do not keep the county permitting information in here. That's going to be available through the Montgomery County's Department of Permitting Services. So this is just a quick overview of the different types of application types. I know Tamika last time we met, she talked about the concept plan, which is the first up here on the top. So basically, a concept plan is a flexible plan type that allows different applicants to get staff's feedback. It also goes to the development review committee, which will receive additional feedback from different agencies in the county. And then after that, a sketch plan. The second one down is an application that is required for specific types of zones. It's the CRT, CR, EOF, and LC zone. And it's also conceptual, but it'll basically nail down the general design, density, public benefits, and the relationship of a master plan. And after that, a sketch plan, it could either go to a subdivision plan, which would be a preliminary or an administrative subdivision, or it could also go straight down to a site plan. But the two subdivision plans we have, one is called the preliminary plan, and the other one is called the administrative subdivision plan. The administrative subdivision plan, like the name suggests, it's pretty administrative. It's a shorter review time, and it's usually for smaller subdivision projects, like for, say, 3 single-family residential homes and the lots on those homes. And then a preliminary plan is for larger projects for, say, like a whole neighborhood of townhomes, something like that. So basically, within these subdivision plans, what's going to be established are the lots, parcels, or basically any right-of-ways or dedications that would happen with the proposed development. And then after that, a project could be subject to a site plan, and this is a lot more detailed. Basically, it's going to show the building footprints, the site layouts, landscaping and lighting, architecturals, things like that. And then finally, record plat, which is at the bottom. Is basically the document that's showing the recorded lots after the subdivision is approved. And this is also recorded with the county records as well. So every application that I mentioned has a corresponding upload checklist, which we have available on our website. So this upload checklist is basically going to tell the applicant all of the required documents and drawings that are required for these specific applications. There's also a file naming convention, which you can see here. This is a screenshot of one of the file naming conventions. And basically, when the applicant uploads the required documents to our online portal for review, they're required to name the files according to these specific naming conventions. So if you've ever looked on DIC, and you might have seen these file names, like the first one is 00-app, and then that would follow with the application number, and so on. So all of the files are basically named this way. A description of all the files is also listed in this document as well. So, if an applicant or anyone is unsure of what type of file these are, and what they sort of entail, there's a description of these types of files located in this as well. So it's a really useful document. So the types of documents and files that would be the most useful for anyone, for you guys, or just anyone in the public who is looking on DIC, I would say the first one to look for would be the statement of justification. The statement of justification basically describes the project in detail with all the proposed unit count, the square footage, as well as a lot of other useful information. And the statement of justification is named starting with 01-SOJ. So that's what it'll show up as on DAC. And then the drawings, there's going to be a variety of different types of drawings that would be useful depending on the application type. So, like the preliminary plan drawing is going to show the lot lines, the right-of-ways or dedications for a subdivision plan. The site plan is going to show the overall footprint and the overall site. The landscape and lighting plan is going to show the plant schedules as well as public space calculations. And then the architecturals will show the proposed building facades, materials, and things like that. It's worth noting that for a planning board resolution, if the application has already been approved and you're looking it up on DIC, a resolution will show up on DIC. And that is basically just saying that, it's been approved and the resolution is basically this image right here, which showing all of the, the unit count and all the conditions of the approval of that application. So during a review process, there are various stages of review with applications. It's worth noting that after an applicant submits an application, the application is then forwarded to our intake team, who is going to perform the initial review of the application. So during intake review, the development fee is calculated. The sign that you see sometimes posted outside of these on the project sites are reviewed then, and basically intake also ensures that all the application materials included with the submission, in addition to another of other things. It's worth noting that the application is not considered accepted until the intake review is complete. So once intake review is complete, the regulatory clock starts, and then the application is forwarded to the lead reviewer in one of our area teams. And then all of the files at that point are then publicly accessible and shown on DIC. So this screenshot is from DIC. If you've ever looked on there before and this has come up, it's basically saying that intake has not been accepted. So it says this plan submission has not been accepted, and then it says check for files at a later date. So the files will then show up after intake is accepted and everyone can see them. So now I'm going to do a quick demonstration on our website to just walk you through DIC. And can you all see our website on my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So if you haven't accessed DIC before, you would just go to our website, montgomeryplanning.org, and then you can click here on the development tab. And then you'll be shown this search box. The way you would be notified of a development project, you might see one of those signs posted outside on the site of the development. I know sometimes Marin or Steve might send you guys application numbers or links to DIC. So that's how you would be notified. And then if you have a number, then you could search for it here as well. So I'm going to show you a few examples of different applications that are at different stages of plan review because they show up a little bit different on DIC. So this is a site plan amendment. So I would just put this number here and then click the search button. And then you're shown this page, which is a really, really useful page. It's basically going to show you all of the application material. So you'll have the application number, the application type, the application name, acreage, master plan, all of that. The proposed development information will be shown in this grid here. If the application is approved, then there'll be information populated here. You'll have all of the contact information of the applicants, the land use attorney, landscape architect. And then once the application is assigned a reviewer, the reviewer will come, information will be populated here. So that's helpful if you have any questions that you might not find on DIC from looking at the files, you can contact the lead reviewer here. Down here, all the related application types that were on this property as well. So then if you click here, this is one example of an application that's still in intake and hasn't been accepted, so you'll be left with this screen. So now I'm going to show you another application. Go back. And this is another site plan. The site plan starts with an 8. And here it looks a little bit different. So you have this real-time tracker, which is going to show you the milestones of the application, which are the review milestones. And then you still have the proposed development information here. So this is, the zone is here. It's showing 365 multifamily apartment condo, 5 stories or more. So 365 units, but there's still no approved development here. So when you click in here, you're going to see files. So the files, as I mentioned before, are the file name is here. And then it'll also tell you in the document type, like what type of files are listed here. So this is going to be the site plan drawings, landscape and lighting, and the architecturals. And then if you scroll down, there's this column which is showing the submitted supporting documents. And then right here, the O1 is the statement of justification, that document that I was telling you about that, has a lot of useful information. It'll show the, whatever the proposed quantities are and whatever the applicant is proposing with this specific application. So finally, I'm going to show you another application that has already been approved, and you can kind of see the difference. So this is another site plan. So you can see the difference here in the approved development grid, there's going to be information populated. So for this specific application, you can see that the planning board date was on December 9, 2021, and it was approved with conditions for 62 single-family attached homes. And then if you click on the application online documents button, you'll see all of these drawings as well, but here it'll say approved drawings. And then if you click on this, you'll be able to see the site plan drawings. Another thing that's going to be different is that there's going to be a resolution associated with this. So if you click on this, you'll be able to see the resolution, and it'll tell you exactly what was approved and all the conditions. You'll also be able to see the staff report, which is here. So another thing to look for, so you'll see that there's approved drawings here. This is, the actual plan that was approved. Another way you will be able to know that it's approved is on the top right-hand corner, there's a stamp here that's stamped by the area team chief. So this is basically like the official site plan that was approved after the planning board hearing. So that is it basically for this presentation. Thank you guys, and I hope this was helpful, but please let me know if you have any questions or comments, and thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Gary, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I am not as familiar with this as I probably should be, but I do go into it sometimes, and there are too many drawings. So I kind of need a map, so to speak, on, there I don't know, 50 drawings, and it could be page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. There is no guide to this, which makes it almost impossible for a layperson who wants to look at something in 15 minutes to be able to gain most information. And that's the only problem I have. I know the information is there, but how do you know what page to look at or what the guide is? So it would be helpful to have a user guide, maybe at the preliminary plan level and site plan, and something that if you wanted to just get a plan view, and Andrew's on now, he can answer for me. I could ask him. If I just want to get a plan view of a project, say the ones we've been talking about in the Great Seneca, like the Bellward Farm, like they shared it, where would I go to just find one drawing with all of the buildings and an outline of all the square footages and parking spaces and units.
Yeah, and yeah, no, I totally understand that. And the tricky part is that when these are prepared, they're not necessarily all going to be uniform. But I will say that for the most part, if you click on, say it's a site plan, if you click on the first drawing, like I can show you this one. A lot of times they will have most of the information on the initial drawing. So on the right-hand side here, it's a little hard to see, but you'll be able to see the development standards. And they'll have the, this is pretty consistent with all of our applications. There's going to be an allowed or required tab column, and then there's going to be a approved or proposed tab, and you'll be able to see what exactly is proposed. And with that, they'll usually have, you know, the entire site plan shown on this page as well. So you'll be able to sort of get an understanding of what they're actually proposing. So that's what I would suggest. Look at the first sheet. There's always going to be a sheet index as well on the cover sheet, which will, you know, sort of give you an understanding of what sheets you might need to look at to show you what you're looking for. But if all else fails and you still can't, you know, find the information you're looking for, I would suggest going back here. And then if you scroll on the bottom here, you'll be notified of who the lead reviewer is, and their contact information is going to be here. And I would suggest shooting them an email and asking them for additional information.
That's helpful, but the item you just highlighted, there were 10 pages, 10 drawings for the site plan. It said, you know, 1 through 10. Well, you know, if you want to get a big overview, it may be a little more complicated, maybe not so user friendly, but
Do it just as Gary. I'll continue that thought. With site plans, yes, often the first sheet has a lot of information, but other plan sets and sometimes site plans, it's buried in like, usually sheet 3 is usually the magic sheet where you get past the approvals and all that and the blank sheets. I think for people who aren't used to navigating these, it would help if we could just like highlight somehow on that list of sheets. Like, here's the one that has the most of the general information layperson is going to be looking for. Layperson, including myself, often when I'm looking at these. And maybe if some sheets could have a little bit more language to them, like circulation plan is usually called out in that list of sheets as circulation. Likewise, utility plan. If there's something, maybe we could try and name these sheets. I think it might help out.
This is Sandy. Also, I would suggest for some people, it depends on how much detail they have, but the statement of justification oftentimes we find gives a lot of useful information in terms of understanding. Some of them are very limited. I don't know if there's actually any kind of a, you know, a rubric that you guys use in terms of what people need to put into that statement of justification. It would be probably helpful if there was, but you know, some of them are very extensive and really great in terms of understanding what it is that they're doing, and others are just super brief. So. Is there a rubric in a protocol, whatever you call it?
Yeah, they're supposed to at least, you know, have the application name and the proposed unit count or square footage, and also cite the code, whether it be Chapter 50 for the subdivision regulations or Chapter 59 for the zoning regulations if it's for a site plan. That's the baseline of the requirements. But the additional information is not necessarily required at the time of intake when the application is accepted.
Okay.
So, is there some an individual or organization at the planning planning board staff that is responsible for managing the content of the DAIC, or is it kind of mostly a submission-based and review-based process across, depending on the plan and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So all of the applications are submitted through our portal, which is called it's Project Docs ePlans. So everything is basically automatically uploaded after intake is accepted. Whatever is on ePlans and whatever the intake reviewer deemed as acceptable is basically automatically um, uploaded to DISC. Now that being said, the IT department, can edit what is shown in DISC and upload additional documents if needed, or if there's any revisions needed, they can update those. But for the most part, it's an automated process, which is why the the applicants are required to name the files a certain way, because those numbers like 01 dash SOJ basically codes it, and it basically tells DIC like what type of document or file is being uploaded based on that.
Right. So
Hey.
I guess my comment, Aaron and company, to that would be, I think that's probably the thing that probably poses the key challenge, translating submissions for regulatory process and review into things that are consumable by lay people, right? Is you've got an automated system which knows how to translate certain naming conventions and so on, and organize groups of files and so on, but there's no smarts, intelligence associated with it for calling out key pieces of information, and there's no requirement for the submission to have a key sheet or or key sheets for at each stage or anything like that. And I would I would submit that for a process that is supposed to be transparent to the public, that is a pretty significant gap. It's there needs to be some translation process, and it's just absent in the in the way things work today, right?
No, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think I don't work in intake. I used to work in intake, so that's how I know how DIC works. But this feedback is definitely helpful, and I think there's a way that I could communicate this to who's in charge of that. And I agree with you, and I think there could be a better way for for this process to work, and to basically have one sheet that communicates the vital information of what you guys are looking for, what the public is looking for. That's easier to find, and the information is just easier to understand. So I'll definitely take that and forward that along.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting discussion and bunch of questions, and very good ones. And I think it's one of these things where all of these plans used to come in as paper plans, and if anybody from the public ever wanted to look at them, they are public information, and someone could come into our office and we could meet with them and pull the paper plans out and unroll them and go over them with them and so forth and so on. As we have transitioned into the electronic media era, the great thought was proposed: what could be possibly more transparent than to take all of these things and scan them and put them online so the public can see exactly what we're seeing.
Right.
But as confusing as these things are, even to us, when we're trying to get through this spaghetti of plans, maybe you can see everything, but if you can't understand what you're looking at, then maybe that's not really all that useful. So I really like this discussion. And I agree with Aaron. I think we can take these points back and talk with our folks who manage this process and see if there's a way to kind of mark key documents. And I think Beyond that, one of the really helpful things, now it's not helpful until after the process is over, but after a plan is approved, looking at the staff report is a really good way to, kind of understand what all has been looked at, considered, how it conforms, and so forth and so on. And the resolution contains the official board action. So the conditions of approval and kind of the key pieces, but that's after the fact. So we'll take these comments back and share them with folks. And then the final thing I think is that, and this doesn't help Gary's initial question, how can I find out in 15 minutes? Which is a really great point, but if you've got the time to get in touch with the lead reviewer that's listed, the lead reviewer, I think, would be happy to steer you to the right place and help you find the information that you want. See, Jane has her hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple questions or comments. One, it seems that if there could be a drawing index provided, as the first document, that potentially would help answer some of these questions, But a second question I had was, how long are these projects being archived after they're approved? Do they stay in DAIC, or do they just live there for a year, or will it ultimately be a record of all proposed development plans for historical purposes?
Yeah, from my understanding, they're there forever. I don't think we have any plans of taking them down. But this, as Steve mentioned, we haven't been doing this for that long. This is sort of a newer process. But I don't foresee them ever going away unless, for a really long time.
When did it start?
That's a great question. Before I started, so at least I think it's been going on for at least five or 6 years, but probably longer than that.
Yeah,
It was
it was phased in. So, we started with preliminary plans and site plans, and then over time added in other kinds of plans like sketch plans and so forth and so on. And some of the last ones to be added were, I think, natural resources inventories and forest conservation exception applications. So they were kind of phased in over a period of some years. I am having trouble remembering exactly when we flipped. I was here
around,
at the time, but I've been
That's
here a
close
while.
enough.
around
Steve. I
2013,
was just-
2014, I think.
That sounds, I was thinking 2014.
That's
And then there's
close
some
enough.
older stuff that's been digitized, but it's a little hit or miss when you're before 2014.
So, Aaron, can I ask you to go back to the sign-in page or where you started with the search and you were putting the applicant number in? I noticed there was an option for map view. Can you click that and just show us the life
Yeah.
science area to see what it would pop up if that's the way we wanted to go into a plan?
Yeah, this map view is, I think I was looking at this recently. I normally don't use this, but I've noticed that there's some bugs, but I do have another website that I can show you I would suggest that's better to look for this at. It's called MC Atlas, which is on our website as well. I can do a really quick walkthrough of that.
That's not. I wanted to know if the DAIC was the
Oh,
answer
okay.
for looking at development plans as part of our master planning effort in the update, just to see what the community was looking at for development plans in this master plan area. It's really what I was looking for. So it doesn't have anything?
It does. I think that IT's having some issues with this. So you're supposed to be able to look for site plans, preliminary plans, sketch plans, everything on here just by looking at a geographic area. But I was looking at this the other day and I don't know
How
if
do you
it,
get your area? So if you had to hit
So you could search
Darnestown
by,
Road or
yeah,
you
you could search
do,
by address or place, and then basically you would just click on, you would see it highlighted like here, like say this is what you were looking
right.
for.
So can
and
you
click.
enter 9636 Godelsky Drive?
How do you spell that?
GUDGELSKY.
Hit that.
Yeah, you didn't have to, I just,
Okay. Yeah, so it's
Interesting.
coming up right here. Yeah.
And then you'd have to use that view plans menu on the right side to click on the different kinds of plans to turn on the layers to see, what it has recorded.
right. But
It's
if you
it's a
can-
little clunky and slow, and that's where I use MC Atlas when I'm trying to find the same information because it's much faster and I think a little more intuitive.
Yeah, MC Atlas, I would, that's what I would refer to. And that it basically has all the same features, and it a lot more. Actually, it has a lot of layers, like looking for master plans or even environmental information. And it's pretty user friendly as well. So you could search it the same way that I just did it here by address, and then you're able to turn on these layers to see the different types of application types as well.
And
So
are
an
they,
example, if you went to the Bellward site, number, what's that, 21? If you clicked on 21, what would you see?
So then this site plan would come up right here, and then you could click it, and then it would take you to DIC, and then you could pull the plans up this way.
Okay, it doesn't automatically pull them up directly. You'd have to go to the other DAIC. Okay.
Right, yeah, it just now basically directs you to DIC.
Okay.
It links to the DAIC.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
We'll take you there.
But
Thank you.
This is helpful for our meetings. Maybe there's better ways, but you can see all of the projects that have some sort of development status. Is that what that's showing? That have either come in, these are all active projects, or are these projects that have been complete and got occupancy? Looks like they're
Yeah,
all
it's
active.
all, yeah, active, and then I believe it's archival as well, so it'll show every application that was ever on that site.
Yeah.
Okay.
When does something become when does like so site plans? When does it become an old site plan? Is that a cutoff from like before 2010, or do we shift non-active approved site plans into old site plans?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure if one is an old, if one would be an old site plan, or what would be considered an old site plan, or a new site plan. Steve, do you know about that?
As old as I am, I still don't know what makes a site plan old versus not.
Yeah, I think
So-
it has some year cutoff at some point, but to me, I think it'd be helpful if you split like active and approved into separate categories. Maybe that's what old becomes, is approved.
Well, the title says pending and recent project approvals. So I don't know what the definition of recent
Right.
is either.
Right.
Yeah.
So the I think MC Atlas just has the ones that are currently active, right? Because otherwise, at some point, all buildings will be highlighted with a name and a number, right? Because eventually everything is going to have some type of site plan. So it's going to be every time you have a new site plan, this map is going to be less and less robust.
To my understanding, MC Atlas is archival as well. Because like this one, for example, is from 1989, and it's still showing up on here.
right?
But
So
That's where I think it'd
but
be helpful
I
if you
think
could have
could
an
filter
active
it.
and an approved.
Active and approved. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That would make more sense.
Right, I think you can filter it though, because I use MC Atlas all the time to look at new projects in a particular area.
But is that MC Atlas currently? Because that doesn't even have our building 4 on it, which went to, got submitted to the county for courtesy review. So I probably wouldn't be there, but that's not even showing our campus with our latest building constructed. That was completed a couple of years ago. Just FYI. I don't want to get detoured around it, but maybe because it didn't go through a site plan. I don't know how projects get into
It could have been a different
MC
plan type.
Atlas. I
Yeah,
don't know what
and,
links them.
and actually, Aaron, do we have if we have we've got a checkbox here for mandatory referrals under development plans. See, there are all those subcategories. And although that's not bringing it up either currently, is it? Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, this would have been.
There's the building. It has the link. It just doesn't show it. It says the
Yeah.
biomedical science building,
Yeah,
but it's not showing in plan. Just
that's a good question, Jane, because your projects are different than most because they are reviewed and approved more by the state of Maryland, like forest conservation is reviewed and approved by state of Maryland, stormwater management, those pieces. And so, yeah, we usually do get these as kind of a mandatory referral, but we don't review them as thoroughly because of the state has a lot of authority on that. That's a good question, Jane.
are there any other state properties? Because I guess Hopkins isn't considered the state.
Now, yes, Hopkins is not considered the state. I'm trying to think of what else we might have.
So we could just be the outlier. I don't want to take up any more time
Yeah.
in the meeting. I'm sorry. I just because
Yeah,
I randomly picked our campus, but
yeah, I'm more familiar with the state review because of your projects, actually.
but I would also assume that projects that are under construction, et cetera, are not showing up here either. So the project that's under construction right across is not. Keep going. I'm sorry. Oh,
Yeah.
GSK or
Yeah, well, you're right. Like the upper right hand corner.
Yeah,
of
right there.
98 Medical Center has a new building standing on it, and it is occupied. And they're building new ones in the lower left hand side of that property right there, at 9800 Medical Center. So I don't know how.
I'm kind of questioning how accurate. We all said the Atlas was the most accurate, but I'm not sure it is.
Yeah, it's a question of how often it's updated, and that's a very good question.
Is this it, the 9800 Medical Center, the site plan amendment?
Well, that is, you can click on that, but I can't remember which amendment number we're up to. It might be E or F on there. And again, if you scroll down, there are other like related projects that are listed for approvals. And sometimes you have to, like, there's an E amendment there, right? So some of the linking history is listed down there at the bottom with related plans. And I think it's at least the E, and there's an F down there, isn't there?
Yeah.
When you click on the E. So but yeah, it doesn't seem to be directly linked on the MC Atlas. So all good questions. We be good for us to get an update from the folks who manage this and find out how long it takes to get the projects recorded on MC Atlas and how that happens and when it happens.
Okay, everyone. We're at past, a little bit over our time on this particular topic. So does anybody else have any burning questions or any, closing comments before we move on?
And you know where to get in touch with us, so you're always welcome. Anybody is welcome to contact us and ask any further questions. We'll be happy to tell you what we know and what we don't know, and what we don't know, we can try to find out.
So, Steve, just to close out the topic, or Aaron, what was I know we made some comments that and questions that you guys felt might be relevant or worthwhile taking back to your organizations. Is one of you going to take that responsibility on behalf of the committee, or should we assemble some questions outside and forward them along? What kind of process would you like around that?
Yeah, I can take responsibility for that. I know who to contact to see if we can make that happen. With in regards to the comment you guys made about having maybe like one centralized document that shows the proposed, whatever the proposed application is, the drawing, the proposed unit counts and square footage, and making it easier to find, maybe making it show up on top of the list of DIC, something like that. So I can definitely communicate that for you guys.
But I would, yes, but I would invite, if you guys want to jot down some specific things that have occurred to you that you'd like to ask about. I think we would gratefully take that and advance those questions as well.
Great. Well, I think in the interest of time, and since this isn't, since we've, I think, spent a good amount of time talking about this, why don't we just open up the invitation for committee members? If you have questions, feel, or comments that you'd like to pass along to Aaron and to the staff for, for consideration. Why don't you forward them on to Steve and Marin, and CC Marilyn and myself for awareness, if you don't mind, and we'll make sure it happens. So, does anybody have any questions or comments before we move on? Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Aaron. Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you guys. I appreciate it.
All right. So with that said, I think Steve, Marin, Tamika, you guys have the floor next for the open meetings presentation and discussion. So would you like to take it from there?
Sure. I think Jessica McBerry is on as well. And Jessica, I didn't know if you wanted to kick us off with that.
Hi, sure. Hey everyone, thanks for having us again. It's nice to be here with you tonight. And so some of you may be familiar with the Maryland Open Meetings Act, and I can share my screen just so that we have this document available to kind of walk through today. But hopefully you can see this Open Meetings Act requirements document on your screen.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So this is something that we sent to you in the sort of agenda for this evening, hoping that we could talk with you about it. Essentially, all of the advisory committees for Montgomery Planning are required to follow the Maryland Open Meetings Act. And what compliance means is a few things. One of which is that we must give reasonable advance notice of all meetings, including the date, time, and place, post an agenda, make sure that the meeting is open and available to the public, take minutes, and have at least one member of the group take a Open Meetings Act training course. And so we wanted to bring this to you for discussion for a few reasons. One of which so that you are aware of the Open Meetings Act requirements. I think that we have been, working with both Marilyn and Phil, over the last, well, Steve, I think over the last decade or so, and developing those agendas and posting them on our website. And we're happy to, continue to do so and use our website as a way to demonstrate compliance with both the agenda as well as sort of the meeting logistical information. And that's certainly something that we can continue to do. But there are a couple of things that are required that we're not currently doing. One of which is taking minutes of each meeting and then adopting those minutes. And so one of the asks that we are here to ask you tonight is if anyone would be willing to volunteer to serve in the meeting minute role, either sort of for each meeting or perhaps on a rotating basis, if anyone would be willing to be the note taker for the group.
So,
And I-
Jessica, one of the points that had been made in our discussion is that these minutes are not, the scary minutes that everybody thinks of with a detailed, a book length notes. So it might be, yes, it might be helpful if some folks could see what the minutes, what's expected of the minutes, so that then they know what they're volunteering for if they choose to volunteer.
Right. I think that's a really important distinction. I think for me, when I think minutes, I think of attributing every comment that's taken sort of court reporter style, and that's really not the ask here. The ask is more, you know, noting general comments and time that the meeting started, time that the meeting ended, sort of general comments, general consensus from the group, or key issues to take back. So not necessarily very specific, court reporter style minutes, but more kind of meeting notes.
So it would be great if we could get somebody or somebodies who would raise their hand and be interested to do a brief minutes on behalf of the committee. Just a small service to our community, as it were.
So I
Anybody?
can do so on a rotating basis, and I say that because I'm actually not going to be at the next meeting. I'll be on vacation then, but after that I can step in.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Is there anybody else that would be willing to split that responsibility with Mark?
I'll do it. It's Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Thanks to both of you.
Okay, so and again, we don't have to think of this as a life appointment. Well, we can revisit it on it at least an annual, if not a semi-annual basis, or if you guys insist, as it were. So, okay, so with that said, Jessica, you said that this this document with this example of the meeting minutes had already been sent out to the group, so that Jane and Mark see what have this example, this kind of brief outline here.
Yes, it was sent in the with the meeting agenda for this evening, and we can certainly send it out again if that would be helpful following the conversation tonight. I think that one other thing to point out is that and thank you so much to both Mark and Jane for your willingness to do this. I know it can be hard sometimes. The other sort of change is that in addition to taking the minutes, the group will need to vote on the minutes at the subsequent meeting. And so that's sort of another layer of process that is a bit new and different from how things have operated in the past, at least in the recent past.
Yes, thanks. So, with that said, I at least, I'll ask on behalf of Mark and Jane, but if you have any examples of, perfectly well, brief and well done minutes from any of your other operating committees, that might be helpful, beyond just the general outline there. So we can
Well,
see we have examples to work from.
Steve and Tamika and Aaron are all frantically taking notes tonight. And so what we could do is sort of provide a template that we sort of pass through legal to say, let's just make sure that this meets the definition of the meeting notes, and then we can share that with Mark and Jane to use as sort of a future template, if that works for folks.
That would be great. Thank you.
So how would you ask people in the chat to type in their names so that you have a record of who is a member and who is a guest, and to keep a record of that, because we didn't announce ourselves or take a roll call, and to vote. I know if Sandy is on still or not, but I know with some of the TMD advisory committee meetings, there generally is not a quorum, or may not be a quorum. So if there's no quorum, how do you vote or take an action on minutes? And then they just pile up. And
Yeah,
so I think it's just a process question someone has to think through.
How many members are on the call tonight?
Well,
Steve, I don't know who our members are. Can you tell by just looking at the list of attendees of the 16 people, how many are members?
So we do have
I'll give you an approximation here in just a second, because I did write down all of the people who are on the call. So I'm going to just put a check mark next to all the people that I know are members, and then I'm probably going to have to go back and double check against the list. But I have
could
written
all
down.
raise our hands as well to show that.
Yeah, so I do meetings for my own board, and what I do is I just, on the minutes, I just have, it's a pro forma box, right? Where I list all the members, and I just put an X and a blank when they're there or not. So every meeting, I have that list in front of me. And so it's not as if we have to do that every time. We just have a list of who's a member, and you just kind of go through and check. The only thing is, sometimes on Zoom, if people aren't using, if I guess they can't do that on Teams, right? You can't come in as an alias on Teams. I don't think.
You can if you join by phone, but I think like one thing we could do is just make sure that we ask if someone joins by phone and doesn't sort of announce themselves, then we could ask who that person is.
Right.
Years ago, when we were meeting in person, I used to try to print out 2 sheets. I had a printout of the members, and we put a date for the meeting at the top of the sheet, and just passed it around for the members to initial. And then we had a separate sheet that said, any guests, and we would circulate that for the guests to sign in. We could probably just give you an electronic version of an updated list like that, so that particularly Mark and Jane could just refer to that and make a little, they want to turn it off or just make a little checkbox, but that way they'd have something to refer to do that. And then when I did this tonight, and I don't know what Aaron and Tamika may have done their own version of this, but I just turned on the people tab down the right side, which lists all the folks who are signed in here. And I used that for my attendance, but I think it would be probably helpful to Mark and to Jane to just have a list to refer to check the boxes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that should be part of the, you said you'll pull together a template. That should be either a page of the template or in the header of the template, a list of members with checkboxes, and then are we required to capture, the visitors as well, or are we not?
I think it is attendees, so that would suggest both members and guests, I believe.
Okay, so what we can do is at the beginning of each meeting, we ask all guests to announce themselves so that we can capture a list maybe in the chat or whatever, and then Jane or Mark can easily copy that out of the chat into the document. So,
or because we have the people box, that was mentioned earlier, we know who the members are, right? We'll check them off. So the other ones, it could just be as simple as, Andrew Bossy, if you're a guest, we can just ask him, who he's representing or whatever. It'd just be a neighbor or whatever.
Right. Yep.
That would take a minute.
Do you want me to say who I am, by the way? I did just arrive and start talking. I'm with County DOT. So I work in the office beside Gary.
You were first on my list.
Hi. Right. I think we're actually kind of trending into, into the second, the 8:15, the next agenda item, which is IAC operating rules, which is kind of overlaps with this. So, but for the open meeting, so why don't we continue this part of the discussion about how we're going to do some of this operation in a minute. But for, is there anything else we need to cover related to open meetings? Other than, so now we have some volunteers for minutes. We have discussed a little bit how we're going to take attendance, and we're going to get a template from the staff that will help to assemble the minutes quickly and to take the attendance quickly. So is there anything else to discuss related to the open meetings requirements? Oh, there is training. That's the other piece, Jessica, I guess, and Steve, that had been mentioned, that we were going to ask if, there's an open meetings training that at least one person on the committee is required to participate in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. At least one member of the group must take an appropriate Open Meetings Act training course. And I believe that these are available through the institutions that you see on the screen here. And one thing that we could do as a follow-up as well is provide some links to these training opportunities directly to those that may volunteer to take the trainings on behalf of the committee.
Right. So our discussion the other day, we had discussed it might make sense for one of the or both of the volunteers for the secretary role to take the training. So Jane and or Mark, if that's amenable to you guys, then that'd be great. If not, then we'll just ask for another volunteer.
Yeah, I'm fine taking the training, but I will fully admit I just got distracted for a minute. So if you can let me know when it is again or how I do so, that'd be great.
I don't
Sure.
have an objection to taking it either. However, I was going to suggest that shouldn't one of the chairs or whatever who's setting agendas as much as the secretary.
Right. Yeah,
thrown
I
that
mean, I don't have
conversation
a,
as well, if
I-
any of you have already taken it. I'm thinking, Marilyn, you may have already taken training.
I haven't. When do we need to be trained by?
I am not sure about I think it's sort of as soon as possible, but why don't I follow up on the specifics for the training and get back with you?
okay. Well,
Great.
and just if you can, yeah, do that and then send out the appropriate links and whatever to the four of us, Mark, Jane, Marilyn, myself. I'm glad to take the training as well. Obviously, a little bit of slack in that schedule would be appreciated, but you know, there you go.
And it also depends on how onerous it is. I mean, is it like an hour, you watch a Zoom for an hour? Or, I mean, that's it, right? Something like that?
That's what I was assuming, Marilyn. So if it's
Yeah.
if we have to go to a camp for a week, I'm not sure.
It
Yeah.
depends on where the camp is.
Well, that's true too. If it's in Mexico, I'm going.
I'm going, yeah, sign me up.
Right.
You guys have the best questions. Yes, we will look into this and I'll follow up with the four of you. I think the one other thing to mention briefly, which perhaps ties right into your next agenda item, is if the group wants to decide what a quorum means specifically, the way that the law is written, it indicates a majority of members are present. And so that could be something for the group's consideration with the discussion of the rules of procedure.
What's our current total membership roster, number of people?
Steve, do you have that handy? If not, I can look it up and get back with you in just a minute.
Yeah, I'd have to double check. See if I can do that.
I was curious because I was wondering if we even had a quorum today.
And we usually seem to have on the order of 12, 10, 12, 13 committee members, and then planning staff, and then a guest or two. That seems to be fairly typical for us, this size of meeting. I'm assuming that 10 or 11 is a majority. I think we're at 20 members, or are we a little bit less than that? Anyway, that's an important number because honestly, it will be important for us to decide if a majority is required, or if we need to uninvite some people from the committee because they never show up, or or if we want to take less than a majority as a quorum, if we have a fairly stable meeting size, which we seem to. Again, I'm not going to claim to remember how many people are at every meeting, but it just feels that way.
I had another question. Is the quorum needed for just for recommendations and rulings? I mean, a quorum's not necessary for like today. If we don't make any decisions, we're not issuing anything. Is a quorum necessary for today's meeting?
No.
I would think not. So again,
But
it
in
goes
the
back to
future,
this.
we will be approving minutes, and approval of minutes, technically speaking, requires a quorum. And
so that would be necessary for every meeting.
Right.
So
And in the past,
we don't have a quorum, does that mean we don't have a meeting?
No.
No.
I think that, I mean, from the minutes perspective, they can pile up, and when we get a quorum, we approve the minutes from the X number of meetings. But I think Phil has a really good point. If we need a quorum to make a decision about matters, site plans or things like that, we need to be more vigilant about who's on this committee and whether they come or not, because what's going to end up happening is that we're never going to be able to take a position if we don't have a quorum, and we become irrelevant. And so, I think we need to have a commitment from people to attend, and if they don't attend, then they can't be on the committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, I think we're we're kind of now more in the IAC operating rules, we're heading than we are in the former decision. But I mean, that's a good general rule of thumb for any kind of body like this, right? I mean, if we shouldn't have people on a roster that just never or rarely show up. That's helps no one. With that said, in the recent past, we've been a little bit informal. We did I mean, send along some comments to planning board. I don't know if we actually confirmed that we had a quorum when we did that. And if we can, it sounds like we're looking to be a little bit more formal, in which case understanding who's we're going to be taking membership or a roster at each meeting, and if we're not getting regular attendance out of folks, then I think Steve, Tamika and Jessica, obviously this is obviously a discussion that will have to be had with those individuals. Is that fair to say?
I was just going to add, I don't know if another layer is voting versus non-voting members. So I'm from the county and I am a non-voting member. I don't know how that factors into quorums and that kind of thing.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, honestly, I didn't. Yeah, I forgot that we have how many non-voting positions do we have?
Actually, I don't know whether I'm a voting or not. I guess if you're not, Kara, I guess maybe I'm not. I mean, I can understand. I've been appointed to the committee, so maybe it's part of the 16 or 18. Then there's a question of really who is a voting member or not. Whether
Yeah,
the
that's
City of
something I think
Rockville, whether the City of Gaithersburg representatives are voting or not.
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll have to look into that, because the only direction that I'm aware of is in the resolution, the county council resolution that requires the establishment of an implementation advisory committee. And it does not specify a specific number of members. It says that it must include citizens of Montgomery County from the City of Rockville and the City of Gaithersburg, that it must include representatives of county government, of City of Rockville government and City of Gaithersburg government, and key landowners and stakeholders. But as far as I know, it is not any more specific than that. We have to make sure that we have at least that representation. And I think we'll need to go back to our legal team and see whether there are any guidelines on who among those who have been appointed to the committee or have agreed to serve on the committee have a vote, and if any do not. We'll have to get back to you on that. That's a very good question. I think I had always operated under the assumption that if you were an official member of the committee representing any of those categories as approved by the planning board action, that you had a vote, but we will double check on that for you.
And Steve, that brings a question for us as well. I'm from the City of Rockville, and I think my role is to kind of look at projects and see how it affects the city, and provide comments based on how projects that are being proposed in this plan area might positively or negatively impact the city. And I take it back to my colleagues at the city and get their feedback and get it back to you. So that's been my role so far, which is how I understand it. And I think what you're looking at, if I'm voting on the minutes and if I'm voting
am I, what is really my role here? I would like to understand that
Okay.
as
Thank
a committee member.
Okay, so it
Yeah.
sounds like, Steve, that, these questions about voting, non-voting, and, government, certain of the government representatives and their participation are things that we will need to clarify.
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah.
Phil,
Yeah.
one other
Yeah,
I
other
just-
thought.
hold
I
on.
just
Mitch has got his
pasted too. Anybody who wants to see the membership that Steve sent out to
Okay.
us in a document a month ago. And it didn't clarify voting or non-member. It was just called advisory committee with our name and association. So if that needs to be divided into voting, non-voting, may need it. But I just pasted it in comments, so sorry if it didn't format well.
Thank you, Jay. Mitch, what, did you had a question?
Yeah, just one other piece we might want to clarify, if email polling votes are acceptable as well. So I've been on several committees where if you don't have a quorum, you have the meeting, you have the discussion, but you postpone the votes and do it via email. So you may send out the minutes to the committee and ask for email approval of them, or if you're going to submit a letter or something like that that you want to file, sign off. If it's a very easily discernible yes or no sort of vote, you can send it out and poll via email. So we should just check if that's acceptable too.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Marilyn, did you have a question also as well?
I did. Just a comment about the, who's voting and who's not voting. And of course, we were founded, gosh, as somebody said, over 10 years ago, right? So my memory might be foggy, but I think the issue is that the city reps, the transportation reps, when we decide to create guidance, or whether we're giving recommendations or giving our opinions, I don't think that the city reps or the department reps, they, correct me if I'm wrong, they can't personally vote for a recommendation, because that's not the city's, when we come up with a recommendation, Manisha can't vote on that from the City of Rockville, because the City of Rockville is going to have a formal response similar to Gary in the Department of Transportation, or that kind of thing, right? So that, when I remembering from way back when, my understanding was it's the non reps, like the city, and I don't know who I'm looking at the list right now. And I think it's the City of Rockville, the City of Gaithersburg, and anyone who works for the county or the planning board wouldn't have a vote. Certainly the office of the county executive, right?
Right, that's my understanding as well. That's what I was told when I took over from other staff in my department, that I was a non-voting member.
It doesn't make sense because to vote, because we have development review and our comments are incorporated to the development review and to the planning board.
Right.
So we wouldn't have a separate vote independent of that process.
Right. But with that said, just a clarification that you wouldn't have a vote on any actions taken by the committee, comments by the committee, et cetera, but on things like what do you call it? Minutes approval, or or agenda approval, et cetera. Are we excluding the vote from that as well? I mean,
I think it just should be clear that the members of the committee, I mean, there are voting and non-voting members of the committee, and it's also going to help us with the quorum, because, we need to have the quorum of the voting members, the majority of the voting members, not the majority of people on the committee. So I think we should clearly delineate who's a voting member and who's not a voting member. And
I
those,
think that's, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I have served on a couple of committees in the executive. It's on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and Dickerson Area Facilities Implementation Group. And the membership of those committees was defined, and it was clearly indicated that I was an ex officio or non-voting member. And it sounds like that's what we need to get to here, and we'll need to consult our legal team to confirm, who is designated as voting and who is designated as not voting. All of yeah.
I was just going to say, Steve, there's a lot of guidance in the county's boards, committees, and commissions that the planning staff can go to. Don't have to invent the wheel here or reinvent the wheel, that you probably would find helpful, and that's one of them, obviously, what you're mentioning. So
Yeah, that's guidance I was not steered to early on in this process, and if you could steer us to it, I would be grateful.
oh, sure, we can provide you with that. Yeah, I'll be happy to get it to you.
I was making some notes in the chat about some things that we've discussed that are operating, that are falling in the realm of operating rules and decisions, follow-ups that we need to make. Who are voting versus non-voting members? What constitutes a quorum for us? Who is it? How many people? Do we allow mail vote for quorum, as Mitch had asked? Were there other questions? And we actually haven't discussed the only real operating rules that we had discussed previously prior to this meeting were around the participation of guests versus committee members, and how we would manage that participation. And certainly guests would not participate in votes, but they could. We had agreed that as we always have, that guests could participate in questions and answers. However, one of the considerations were do we only allow committee members to ask questions first and then allow guests, or are we less formal about it, as we typically have been, and manage it in a more ad hoc, Marilyn, Phil, Steve, Marin kind of conversational way? Question management, and when can guests ask questions, I guess, is the other. So these are some questions that we have. Are there other decisions that we need to make? So we've already discussed, we've decided on secretary role, and on training participants list. So that was easy. What other considerations are there for operating rules that we should capture and that we'll need to decide on?
I'm sorry, Phil, could you repeat that?
Right. So Marilyn, do you see the list that I created in the meeting chat? Yeah. So then the question is, are there other considerations for our operating rules that we have not yet discussed, that I have not yet captured, that we should make sure we capture? And the floor is open to everyone. I mean, this is kind of the opportunity to say, I really think we should do this on our meetings, right? So if there's any of that out there, then let's hear it. Okay, so do we want to try, it is 8:30, which was our adjournment time, but do we want to try to take a vote of our TBD quorum? We'll assume we have a quorum for tonight, perhaps, and or do we want to I mean, we can't answer the voting members versus non-voting. That's research by Steve, and company. What is a quorum for our committee? Who, how many? That really is a question of, are we going to stick with a majority quorum, and perhaps we can't answer that question until we have the answer to the first one. So maybe we defer both those questions. Do we allow mail vote for a quorum? I think that question we could answer fairly quickly. I think we should just take a vote on that and, maybe, define it a little bit. Were you going to say
So,
something, Michael?
I was. So there is a legal definition of whether boards can take email votes, and it has something to do with the discussion aspect. And so whatever email votes are, and I'm going to botch the whole legal thing, but there has to be everyone has to see everybody else's vote if there's any discussion. So I would be in favor of votes like the minutes, or things that are not controversial or something like that. But when it comes to votes such as, are we going to recommend approval of a site plan? That's very complicated. And sure. I would not be in favor of votes like an email vote like that. So I think that, there's a difference between, minutes versus site plan approval, or site plan recommendation.
So let's use a specific example from our past. In the past, what we have done, we've done this on multiple occasions, is we've started the process of formulating question responses within meetings, but then had iteration in email and then submitted, but the approval, the go ahead on the final questions, I think we have done via email.
Yes, because the discussion took place, during a meeting, right? It wouldn't be a situation where we haven't had a conversation about it and somebody wants to do an email vote where a discussion never occurred.
Right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
For instance, if we didn't have, if the residential property, the PSTA had a zoning text amendment and we weren't meeting in the interim and somebody wanted to take a vote on that, right? That's not wouldn't be fair because we haven't had a discussion on it. So I just, I think we just need to be cautious about saying, I don't think this is a yes or no answer.
Okay.
Or it's not a yes or no answer. It's a,
it's a contingent, contextual.
Contingent. Yeah.
Yes.
So in my organization, our policy is that we can take email votes if a topic has already been discussed. But if at any point somebody says that this is not an appropriate email vote, then we don't have an email vote.
Sure, that sounds like a reasonable set of guidance.
I would also think that if we didn't have a quorum at a presentation, then how do you make recommendations on a presentation that people didn't see, even if it is an email conversation? So it may be around review of site plans seems to be but again, I really wonder what we will be asked during the master planning process as a committee. But as a rule, I would say site plan recommendations or comments need all parties to be seeing the presentation. If I didn't see a presentation, I don't know how I can approve comments on it, So, unless I go seek it myself and review it without interpretation of the presenter. So,
Yeah, Jane, I think that's a good point in terms of, I think that there would need to be a quorum for the presentation. But, and if we had, for instance, if we had a presentation, we had a quorum, we had a very good discussion, we came up with draft recommendations, then somebody did the writing and editing and sent it out for final approval. If you weren't at that meeting, I don't think that you can weigh in on it. Like I think it's at that point, then, at some point you have to, be present. I don't know if I'm being clear about that. Otherwise what's going to happen is that we'll never be able to take an email vote because someone's going to say, well, I wasn't even in the minutes, right? Well, I can't take an email vote because I wasn't there. Well, that's a bit ridiculous. So I take that one back.
So, Marilyn, it sounds like what we need to, as with some of these other things, we need a little bit, we need to specify this a little bit and, vote on the specification that, based on this. So this is an example of one where we've discussed it. Now we should go away, write it up, bring it back to the committee or send it around to the committee for review for those who were here for the discussion. So, correct. So.
I would also suggest that I guess you have to make motions to vote.
Yes.
Correct.
So one thing that I would suggest the staff look at as well is that we're not the only implementation advisory group that the planning board has, and we're advisory. So obviously a similar set of discussions should be taking place on open meetings and voting for all of them. And I wonder if the planning staff has put together an outline of procedures for committees, of which should be consistent, one would think, with the Shady Grove and with White Flint and with what other ones you have out there. I think there are 4 maybe, or 5.
So I can start with this, but I'd certainly ask Steve to chime in with his thoughts. So we do have many implementation advisory committees, both in the Mid-County area, as you mentioned, Shady Grove and White Flint. We also have implementation advisory committees in Bethesda. And we, can certainly sort of pull together a summary of how those different committees work. We are sort of here to serve you, right? That we're staffed to this committee. And so it's really sort of a function of how this committee wants to operate and have its rules of procedure. And those may vary between the other implementation advisory committees that we have. But if it would be helpful for us to sort of give a snapshot of how some of the other committees operate from their rules of procedure, that's certainly something that we could do.
Yeah, I mean, Jessica, if there isn't a standardized way that the other committees are doing it, then I guess, Gary, what I would submit to you is if there aren't an existing set of standards, I don't think it's in our best interest to try to formulate standards from a mishmash of practices. I think we should just attempt to answer these questions that we've defined here, and it sounds like Steve and Jessica and company have a little bit of research to do on some of the questions so they can provide feedback into us, and we have a little bit of work to do in terms of we can document what we've discussed around mail voting, but if Steve and Jessica find guidance on mail voting, that would be helpful. And the only one we really haven't discussed at length was question management, which is probably the easiest of the topics anyway, and I'd say that we can defer it till the meeting when we further discuss the rest of these questions. So, okay, Mark, you had added one for the list, which we discussed as well, which is accountability. How are we, we need to track attendance, and we need to be aware of and make folks aware if they're not, contributing, as it were. So, is there anything else we should talk about as far as the discussion of IAC operating rules? Okay, Steve and Jessica, are you okay taking away these bullets from the meeting chat and assembling some responses on them for us to discuss at our next meeting? Or actually, or over email, you can provide them over email, and perhaps we can start discussion over email, but it feels like this is going to be a topic for a next meeting.
I'll say sure, and then I will depend on Jessica and Maren and Tamika and Aaron and whoever else I might be leaving out to help us remember to do that and make sure that we do that for you.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Did you have something else, Gary?
No, it's fine.
No. Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have anything on this topic before we move to adjourn? I did want to have one thing I wanted to share. Actually, I'll just paste it into the chat. This is more informational. We should probably discuss it. But this is something, some future topics for discussions that we had discussed amongst Marilyn, myself, and the staff. A few, and there was one more. Let's see. So this is informational for you guys. The idea is some of these are background type, in context to help us as we're, reviewing plans, master plans, et cetera, going forward. Again, learning opportunities to help us improve our ability to advise and so on. So I don't think we have a clear agenda around these. I don't know, Steve, Maren, Tamika, Jessica, if you guys have any plans for what we're, and any of these upcoming yet. I'm assuming you do not. So we'll probably be seeing some of these. And if folks have any thoughts or feedback on any of these, perhaps I'll take the step of sending this out in an email after the meeting so that folks can see this and provide any feedback or any thoughts or insight into other ideas. So just thought I'd throw that out there. All right. Anybody have any comments or questions before we wrap up? Okay, then I move to adjourn.
This input has been really, really helpful, and I really appreciate everybody. There's a lot of really good questions, good ideas, and I think you're going to help us really tighten this up and make it all work better. So I can't begin to thank you enough. Well done.
Thank you all.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.